just talk normal.
Okay,
And
all right.
I think
Well,
we're
this is good.
good,
Okay,
basically.
we're good.
Yeah.
So we'll
Hold
pick
on.
up where we left off.
Gotta lower it just a tad bit somehow. Okay, much better. Okay.
Questions great financial advisors ask. I was going to write a book on the 7 questions
The seven
you
questions.
need
What
to
seven
ask
questions?
if you're in sales.
The seven questions you need to ask if you're in sales.
Yeah.
What is that?
Well, that's a different story. It's a different subject.
All right, let's get started. So we're gonna talk a little bit something that's a little bit different from what we talked earlier. I mean,
Oh.
the previous day.
Mhm.
But let's start on that. So, I don't remember the question. Give me a second.
That's okay. You've been busy.
Yeah. All right. So,
All my experience. Okay.
in all your experience in your life, right? In all your experience, you've developed, you know, best practices,
Mm-hmm.
and we're going to touch on one of those best practices today.
Okay.
So the question is this: what is the secret to the perfect diaper setup?
The perfect what setup?
Diapers.
Diapers.
Diaper setup. How do you set up diapers?
Diaper. That's a question that I'm not really proficient to answer
You
because
don't have experience in it?
I've changed a few diapers, but I'm not an expert at it.
You're not
So,
an-
so you don't want to follow my advice
All right, so
when it comes to diapers.
okay, so maybe lacking in diapers. Maybe it's something you can work on. You still have time. You can,
Yeah, I
you know.
still have one child that's going to have some children, so
Yes,
I
exactly.
have some more grandchildren to practice on.
So I think that we've uncovered a blind spot that
Yes,
you have that you obviously need to work on.
that's correct. Yeah, I have a few blind spots. You discovered one. I'm sure we'll run into a few more.
Yeah, I'm sure we will. All right, moving on a little bit.
Yes,
Kids,
yes.
family, right? How do you raise kids, right? If we, well, maybe we'll take a step back, right? Should we want kids, and if so, what's our plan for having kids?
I think that one of the greatest joys of relationship is bringing other people bringing them up, educating them. And there's more than one kind of child. The first one that everybody thinks about is your biological child, but you can have spiritual children. And I think I've talked to you about this in the past. As you get older, you reach a certain age, some people it's 50, 60, 70, where you have to pass on your DNA, your spiritual DNA, just as much as when you were in your 20s, you wanted to pass on your physical DNA. And it's just as important and just as compelling, and you have as little control over it as you do over your desires to pass on your physical DNA. So, passing on your spiritual DNA is a little trickier because you're dealing with adults, and they have to be in a place, a position, a situation where they want to inherit your spiritual DNA. So that's a area that I've been involved in for a lot of years.
Well, why do you feel a need, or
I don't know.
why do you feel compelled
I don't
to
know. Why do you feel
share
compelled
the
to?
DNA?
Why do you feel compelled to have sex when you're young? You just do. That's the way you're built. I think God made us that way,
Okay, so that's
to pass
interesting. So
on.
God made us to inherently want to share our DNA, whether it's
I think
physical
so.
or spiritual.
I think so. At least that's the way I feel about it. I can't explain why I want to do it. You say it's ego or pride but the same thing that drives you to have children, drives you to pass on your DNA. But you wanted to talk about raising children. I think there's um, there's a really good methodology that people should consider when they're interacting with others.
Hmm.
And that's the position that you have with them while you're interacting with them. And this works really, really well with children, grandchildren, and works well with employees. And as I said before, a methodology or a process has to be effective across all relationships. If it only applies employee-employer relationship, it's probably not a universal truth.
So it has to be a universal truth that is applicable, whether it's family, whether it's in
Yeah.
company, or
Right. Then it has some validity that maybe this is something that we should consider if it works across all kinds of relationships. If it only works in a certain types of relationships, like you read a management book and well, I wouldn't use that with my family, then it's probably just a trick or a shortcut. It's not a valid
it's not a
long-term.
universal truth.
Yeah, it's not. Yeah, it's not a long-term solution to solving anything.
So what is your framework? So what are the universal?
Well, there's a bunch of frameworks,
Yeah. So let's talk
but
more about it.
I think in your interactions with people, and there's different words you could use, but I'll use words that have I think a universal understanding. The first step in a relationship is training, and training is where you don't apply any logic. You just say, do it. Just do it this way. That could be in sports or it could be with a baby. You just train people when you're starting out. And then the next step, and they get a little older, your children especially, you can start to teach them. You can give them some logic and understanding behind why we're doing what we're doing. So when you start out with an employee, and you want to get some productivity and you want them to become successful early on, you just say, just do it this way. And after they do it, then you could teach them. Now they can be interchangeable. With a baby, you can't be logical with a 6-month-old. And if you try to train a 7-year-old without teaching them, you're going to run into roadblocks.
So teaching as in providing logical
Yes,
instructions?
exactly.
Like, do you expand on the why, or is it just
No, the why is the
mechanics?
third step.
Okay, so the mechanics, just purely the mechanics.
Yeah, so the first step is just, we just say, this is what you're supposed to do. Okay. So it's
training.
that's a training, right? It's sort of so you can have a consultant. There's different levels of relationship with people. A consultant just tells you what to do. Just tells you what to do. A coach tells you what to do and how to do it. So.
And that's the second one.
Yes, and then the third step in the relationship, and this is when a child is 6, 7, 8, 5, 9, somewhere in that ballpark, depending on their maturity. You have to start to lead them. You can't just teach them. You have to say things like, or handle a situation similar to, well, I don't know what you want to do, and I'll support you whatever you want to do. But here's what I've done in similar situations. You lead them. You give them, well, you can make whatever decision you want tonight, but tomorrow morning you're going to be stuck with that decision. You can stay up till 10 o'clock, you can go to bed at 8, but come 6, you're getting up, and you just have to live with that solution. So you lead them. You let them make a decision, and then you stand behind them to.
So you let them make a decision, but you also explain the why?
Yes, the consequences.
The consequences.
And they will suffer the consequence. You can't keep anybody that's going to learn away from the consequences of the action. Because it's like, I can't tell you how many times I've been in a situation where I've won. So what is it that made me win? I did this, was that, this, but was this, was it this? Why did I win? Why did I get the sale or win the race? Well, I did a lot of things right. But when you lose, you can start to realize, I didn't train hard enough. My technique wasn't quite good enough. I misspoke when I said this and I should have said that, and I saw the deal float away.
So it's a feedback loop.
When you lose, when you fail, is when you can analyze and look at the situations that didn't go as well as they could have gone, where you could have trained harder, learned more, been smarter, and that's when you see people try to keep their children from failing, and that's a big mistake. You ought to help them fail, because that's when they're going to learn. You want to help people fail, whether it's a child or it's an employee or whatever. That's where the opportunity was. I used to be in technology, and I used to lead a large group of developers and managers. And the hardest thing I always had to do was to teach the developers, when you got a problem you can't solve, come see me. I say things like, I love solving the hard problems. And when they'd bring me a problem they couldn't solve, I'd gush all over them and make them feel really good that they'd given me something to work on. But basically it was like I get rid of bottlenecks. I wanted to know when there was something that was holding somebody up so that I could put somebody else on it or whatever. So it's a case where the failures allow you to become more successful. So then there's the fourth step, and that's sharing. Somebody gets so good at something, pretty soon they're as good as you are, maybe even better, and now you can talk about it on an equal basis. I know my son was a perfect example of this. About 20 years ago, he was a programmer, and it was in programming at the time. And we met for lunch, and we're sitting having lunch together for like an hour and a half, and we went through all 4 characters. And he understood this because I told him this philosophy of how we interact with other people. The sharing was done on a spiritual level. He was a very, very mature Christian. So we were able to share on a spiritual level. And when it came, I was still a better programmer than him at that point. So I was able to lead him on solving some programming issue he had, which was, and also teach him, because we were both in the same field, so I was able to teach him some stuff too, because I'd been in the field 30 years and he'd been in it 10 at that time or something. But the one area where it was just training was, we were talking about girls, and he said, I have this problem with this girl I'm dating and blah, blah, blah. And I said, I can't give you any logic or any leading in that because I've been married for a long time now. All I can tell you is this is what you got to do.
So that's the training.
It was a training piece.
This,
Yeah, right. It was a training piece because I didn't know the answer. So we went through all 4, and we had a good laugh about it. That
Right.
we went through all 4 relationship scenarios in that one lunch, and I think it's good to know what your limitations are and be willing to accept them. Some things, like changing diapers, I'm still in the training phase.
So your wife just had to tell
you how to do, right.
And then at some point she tells you
Right,
how to do it.
right, and why. So it's sort of like what to do it, how to do it, why you do it is, and the last one, it tells you who you are. The last one is who you are. If you're a Christian, it's who you are in Christ. If you're not, it's still who you are. Because that's the sharing. Who am I? I'm sharing with you who I am. So it's the who, what, when, where, why. Well, it's the who, how, what.
So let me reiterate. So the first part, which is the the training.
Mhm.
So if we go back to the analogy of the diaper, so the training you just say go do the diaper, go make
Yeah.
the diaper,
Yeah.
and then in the teaching you show them exactly how to do the diaper. Is that
Well, teaching is more is bringing in the logic, bringing in some head knowledge, and diapers. That's a little doesn't really apply because there's no head knowledge, and maybe there
well
is.
maybe
You
there
look
is.
at the baby's behind, and maybe you're supposed to, if it's red, you're supposed to use some kind of Vaseline, or maybe you don't use
Diaper
Vaseline. Maybe use
rash,
yes.
right? Watch out
So
for diaper
right.
rash.
So there's more to it than just actually putting a diaper on. So
So the training is okay. Here's how you put the diaper. Here's how you
yeah, and
left, right,
right,
up.
yeah, and the
And then,
teaching is maybe some of the nuances of
right,
what's the baby going through.
right. And the leading would be, hey, it's about time you should be putting the diapers, changing the diapers, or else
Yeah, maybe.
rashes will
Yeah,
happen.
this is a lousy. You picked a shitty analogy.
Yeah, but it simplifies the concept so that we can drill down right down to the universal truths, right?
Right, the universal truths.
Right. Because
Right,
it has to be
and then
applicable
sharing
to
is
everything.
right. Share is everything, and sharing is like you change a diaper, I change a diaper. Let's tell about our diaper changing experiences. I was teaching my husband how to change diapers. I'm sure women in their meetings talk about the hilarity of watching a guy change a diaper, but maybe not. I don't know.
Well, so let's take those 4 steps and go through the various stages, of a child's life, right? Diapers are too simplistic, but now let's go up to when a child is a 2-year-old,
Right.
and then,
There's crossover points.
right,
And you
crossover points.
never and the reason I brought my son's analogy into my son's allegory into the anecdote, I guess, into the discussion was because it doesn't matter how old you are, you can still go through all the stages.
Right.
If I'm teaching you about skiing and you don't know how to ski, we might start off with just do this, and then we move on up, and pretty soon you get to be a really good skier, and we just share
Right.
our skiing stories. And so in this with the same person, you're going to have different elements of the relationship. Maybe if he's a programmer, you're talking about at one level, and if he's trying to become a manager, you're talking to him in a different level. So, but you always want to know where you are in the relationship with the other person. With guys, it tends to always be sharing, but it doesn't have to be. In our relationship, we've had different levels and different elements of that of those particular elements of the relationship. So I think that the most important thing is that you know how to transition from one element to another, especially with children, because you've got to start using logic with children and you've got to start leading them at a certain age. If you wait to always try to train your upcoming teenager, your 10, 11, 12-year-old, and you don't lead them, you're going to get rebellion, and you're going to get issues. You've got to start letting them make mistakes. You've got to start leading them. And even sharing. You can even start sharing. Let me tell you a story about when I was your age and I did blah, blah, blah. I started sharing with my son when he was 15 about driving accidents. And then he did have one eventually, and he told me, I remember that story you told me about, that my first accident would be when I was backing up, and it was. It might be when I was backing up,
What would you say would be the appropriate ages, right? So at what age?
It's different for everybody. It could be, and it doesn't, and it's the situation that you're talking about. I was talking to you about my son. He was in his late 20s, and we were still doing a training session because I didn't know anything except what works, not why it works, how it works, because it was about women. But other things we were able to share because he was very mature. He was 40 years old in some characteristics. So you can't say what age it is. It's where you are in a process. And we can talk about a child at 2. Can he start to understand some logic? Yes. So you can start to be a little logical with them. And maybe when they're 6 or 7, you can start 5. Maybe you can start to lead them a little bit. And maybe when they're 9 or 10, you can start to share. But it's not everything, and it's a constant process where you have to continually be reevaluating how you're interacting with your child. If you want to make them grow up as fast as they should grow up, as fast as they can grow up, based on their particular godly given characteristics.
What about marriage? Does it go through the 4 stages as well, your relationship with your spouse?
I think interesting with marriage is an advisor to someone that's married. I do use those steps. But when you first get started off, I think that by accident we end up going through the 4 steps because we don't know. We're all just married. The first time we get married, we don't, so we just do stuff, and it's accidental. It works, and then we start to talk about why it works, and pretty soon, we get into the sharing stage. Remember we did that? It was really good. Yeah. So, you end up going to. And so that's what would normally happen in a relationship. But I'm talking about when you're consciously in control of a particular relationship, whether you're working with someone to bring them along in a subject, to make them more knowledgeable, confident, professional, whatever, or you're working with a child, working with a employee. You just start. I'm sure you've worked with employees, and you don't start them off at the very top, sharing, because they've never done anything. So you can't share with them until they've actually accomplished some things that you can share and then learn. Because it's a thing in the Bible that says iron sharpens iron. And so that's the sharing part. You learn from somebody else by sharing your experiences and listening to them share their experiences. So that's the fun. That's the most fun stage is when you can.
So the 4 steps, or the four phases, if you will, is naturally progressive. You go
Yes.
from one to the other.
Right.
It's not dependent on age or time. It's
Correct.
Just contextually is whatever's relevant to the person at that point.
Correct.
And some of them may stay at one stage for a long time before moving on, and for others they can move on really fast.
Yeah, that's all true. Mm-hmm.
And so especially in the context of, let's say, if you had to mentor or guide someone who would be a manager for the first time, then you would go through those 4 stages as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right.
What are some areas that you're seeing that, if you're teaching someone for the first time to become a manager, for example, what are the common areas that you'd have to watch out for?
Oh yeah. There's a number of things. People that become managers for the first time, you all kind of make a common mistake. I always ask them, okay, there's 4 possible combinations of relationship between you, your employees, and your boss. Before, it used to be just yourself and your boss. Now you've got people working for you, and you work for somebody, right? So do you tell your employees what to do and tell your manager what to do? Do you ask your employees what to do and ask your manager what to do? Do you tell your employees and ask your manager, or do you ask your employees and tell your manager? There's only one right answer. Which of those 4 combinations is the right one? And almost invariably, new managers will get that wrong.
So So what is the right answer?
Well, I'm going to ask you.
Well, you're being interviewed. I know the answer, but I want you.
Oh, you know the answer.
Right, I
Okay.
want you to talk about the answer.
Oh, okay. I'll be glad to talk. Yeah, because I think I talked to you
spoke
about
about this.
We spoke about this before, right? Yeah. Almost invariably, the employees will say, "This is just," and this is the most common mistake, is I'm going to tell my employees what to do and ask my manager what he wants done. And that's absolutely backwards. So once they figure out that their manager wants them to give them solutions and fix problems for them, and they start to realize what the expectation that their boss has for them, then they would learn what the expectation is that they should have of their employees.
And it also takes away accountability too, because if they expect you to give them the answer all the time, they can step back and not be accountable for anything. And so you're empowering them.
Right. So, but you asked me what the most common mistake new managers make, and the most common mistake is they start to want to tell their employees what to do instead of asking them for solutions.
And vice versa on the manager side.
Right. They go to their manager and say, "What would you like me to do?" and say, "Here's what we should do, and here's why."
So essentially flipping it the other way around, as the manager looks at you as the
Right. And the same. So you want to treat your boss the same way you want your employees to treat you, which is bring you solutions. And otherwise, what do I need you? If I'm going to be telling you what to do, why do I need you working for me? I need somebody that's going to be telling me what to do, and maybe even arguing with me, maybe giving me and I used to tell people I work for when I had bosses, and I tell my clients this, who are my bosses now. Look, I'm going to I'm going to go down a path and make a point, and I'm going to stay in that point until you tell me the magic phrase. When you say the magic phrase, then I will go along and I'll support you, and we'll implement what's the magic phrase? I've made up my mind. You say, I've made up my mind. Once you've made up your mind, it's like the final answer. It's the final answer. Then I'm not going to give you any more pushback. I'm just going to go implement what you've asked me to implement.
Got it.
And managers like that. I like it when my employees, argue with me until I tell you I've made up my mind, and then just go implement it. Just go do it now. Just go execute it. Well, whether you agree with me or not doesn't matter. Whether I agree with my boss or not doesn't matter, as I'm getting paid to execute.
Right. So to summarize, So if you had to summarize the 4 phases again, what is the summary?
It's consultant, coach, mentor, and pastor. Yes,
So
those
the first
are
one, which is training, is consultant.
yes, coach.
Coach, which is teaching.
Right. Mentor is leading, right, and pastor is sharing, right. And if more pastors shared, I think we'd have better. The best pastors are those that share.